it's going to take you longer because it actually takes time for that. Once you burn those ATP levels down, it takes a few minutes for that actually to regenerate. So if you are taking very short rest periods in between and just going back-to-back sets, you're actually training more or less endurance than you are actually training intensity, right? And so when you're doing your squats or whatever, you want to do these explosive squats, right? So there's a couple ways that you can do this. Hey guys, Aaron Kupitz, personal trainer, functional aesthetics EC, helping average guys perform better inside and outside the gym. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the strength training hierarchy, particularly for beginners. So a basic progression of generally how you want to progress through your strength training journey. Now, after you go through this progression, there's all sorts of different variations of what you can do after that. But this would be probably the first, let's say 6 months to a year, maybe even 2 years of your training that you can progress in this manner and follow this sort of training protocol and see great results. So the 4 phases of strength training hierarchy are, number 1, cardiovascular endurance. Which isn't really even typically thought of as being a strength metric, but we'll get into that more later on. You have muscular endurance / strength endurance. Then you have bodybuilding or hypertrophy training. Then you have strength, or the most similar thing would be like powerlifting or strongman training. And then you have speed / power training, which is broadly applicable to most team sports and a lot of track and field type sports, right? Pretty much the only sport that you don't really need that much power or speed in is your endurance type sports. These 4 categories also form the foundation of my hybrid strength program. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below by typing in hybrid, and I'll give you more details on that. Now, the first component here is cardiovascular fitness. And as I said, most people don't really think about hybrid or about strength training as being needing to have cardiovascular fitness for that. But the reason you do need that is because if you don't have adequate cardiovascular fitness characterized by being able to, I would say try to do at least 20 to 40 minutes of walking every single day. And the government guidelines currently are like 120 to 180 minutes, so like 2 to 3 hours per week of zone 2 cardio. So depending on your fitness level, that could be walking, that could be jogging, that could be, running at a 7-minute mile pace if you're in very good shape, right? And the reason that you want to have, now my personal, I guess before getting into this a little bit farther, my personal take on this is that if you can run for like 20 minutes at a moderate pace, right, without getting winded, that's a good base level of aerobic fitness for, general health and most sports, all right? And a lot of guys are afraid that they're going to, get less, they're going to negatively affect their gains, muscle and strength, by doing too much aerobic activity, right? Now, this is becoming less of an issue because of guys like Nick Bare with his hybrid athlete type training, right? You're running marathons, you're also doing powerlifting stuff, you're competing in bodybuilding shows, all this kind of stuff. Before him, you actually had like Alex Vieta, and actually many like military disciplines incorporate hybrid strength style of training as well. So it's not anything new, but in the bodybuilding communities and the powerlifting communities, it was usually like, let's try to do as little cardio as possible because we don't want to, burn off our muscles. We don't want to get skinny in the process, right? And so really it only becomes an issue when you're doing like an hour or more on a regular basis of cardio. So like if you're going out and running like 10 miles a day, 4 or 5 days a week, yeah, then it's going to probably start to become an issue, right? And and it also depends on like the kind of aerobic exercise you're doing as well. So between running and cycling, if you've ever seen cyclists, they usually have massive quads, right? And because they're usually not too focused on building up their upper body, it's not because the cycling makes their upper body small, it's just because they don't want the extra weight to carry around, and so they're not too concerned about building up their upper body, right? But you can definitely have a bigger, more muscular upper body and be doing a lot of cycling. I've definitely seen a few guys doing that, right? If that is what you like to do. But between the two of those, running tends to be more of a detriment to building muscles than cycling does. And it's because when you're running, every time you're hitting the ground, there's a lot of eccentric contractions, right? And those are very damaging to the muscle fibers, right? And so they tend to be very catabolic, right? So between running and cycling, if you want to get your cardio up and you want to preserve muscle mass and you want to have as much cardiovascular fitness as possible, probably leaning more towards the side of cycling as opposed to running. Now, my personal feeling is like, you know, sometimes they'll get into the debates between, okay, you can build actually more muscle mass using the hack squat machine or like the, you know, the leg press machine than you can with doing a regular barbell back squat. And my feeling about that is like, yeah, you can build more muscle, right? Maybe it more optimally overloads those muscles and stuff, right? But I guess if you want to be a professional bodybuilder, if you want to be a competitive bodybuilder and all you care about is having the biggest, most shapely muscles and you're not too concerned with performance, then doing that would make more sense. But squat is going to have more carryover to life and sports. Just because it's incorporating your whole body. Yes, it is predominantly a lower body exercise, but you also have to stabilize your core and you also have to use your upper back to a certain amount of extent when you're doing that. So it is actually a kind of a full body exercise when you're doing a squat as opposed to laying down on a chair and pushing with just your legs, right? So again, functionality, be better to do that. So and the reason I bring that up is that, yeah, do some running. So like I think like you should be able to run, 3 miles or something like that. Run 2-3 miles, and if you could do that a couple times a week, that's not going to have a negative effect on your ability to build more muscle, right? And I think that in fact it'll actually improve your health because if all you do is cycling, you're going to lose a little bit of that coordination for the running, right? And running is a basic activity that humans are supposed to be able to do, right? Some do it better than others, just like there's some people that are naturally going to be stronger than other people, but everybody should be able to run unless, of course, you have, you're like an amputee or you have some sort of, condition like maybe like polio or something like that, has distorted your natural structure, right? So you should be able to do all these things. So the other thing that you want to keep in mind, if you're going to be doing more cardio, if you want to be doing more than an hour of cardio, and really if you're trying to get strong, then that's probably not the best idea just because it's so hard to, offset the fatigue involved between those two things. And so it's almost like a full-time job recovering from the endurance stuff and then from the strength stuff. And you have to have like kind of a lot of time on your hands and be pretty serious about this and not really do much else with your life. So, and if that's your thing, that's fine, but this is not what I'm talking about here. So what you want to be making sure though is if you are incorporating more running into your routine is you want to bump up those calories a little bit. Maybe add a couple 200-300 calories extra if you're adding in the running, and make sure you're hitting your protein goals too, right? As long as you're getting enough protein, it's unlikely that you're going to be in a calorie deficit or that you're going to be wasting muscle away in the process of running. You might not be getting bigger muscles and stuff, but at least it will help you to preserve those muscles. What's going to help you to get more muscles is to just make sure that you're getting enough calories in general. And one of the things that's beneficial about running and those kind of things is that they tend to actually increase your appetite. And this is also why in my hybrid strength program, we do different forms of cardio in conjunction with the strength training, and we also do it in a very specific sort of way so that you can keep your hunger down while also maximizing for fat loss, right? So it's really the program design is so that you are optimizing for muscle and strength while you are also shedding body fat, and then we combine that with the nutrition aspect of that. So all three of these components all come together, your strength, your cardio, and your nutrition, to make sure that you are maintaining, as much strength and muscle as possible while also shedding the body fat, while also getting more powerful and, having the energy to do all those kind of things. So the last section here in the cardiovascular endurance component of this video, and I probably should have put this earlier. So if you're still watching, thank you for making it this far. I kind of went off script a little bit there and flip-flopped the order of how I wanted to do things. So probably the most important reason that you want to improve your cardiovascular fitness is because I was talking about, okay, cardiovascular fitness is not going to be a detriment to your strength and muscle gains, but I didn't really get into how it can actually help you and actually be beneficial for your strength and muscle gains. So when you're doing, if you're trying to get really strong, like you're doing powerlifting or whatever, you're thinking, okay, I don't really need a lot of cardiovascular fitness, I just want to move this weight. But you'll oftentimes see these bigger guys and they'll be getting winded after lifting the weight, because you are using a lot of energy, right, when you are moving those heavy weights. In fact, the amount of energy that you consume when you are doing an exercise scales proportionately with the amount of weight that is on that bar. So a guy who's doing 300 pounds by 10 is going to be using up more energy, more calories than a guy who's doing 10 sets or 10 reps with 135 pounds. And it makes sense because he's doing more total work, more total volume, right? 300 times 10 is greater than 135 times 10, right? So makes sense, right? Now, that being said, that's why it makes sense that this guy doesn't want to be gassing out when he's doing the lift, right? If you have a good base of aerobic fitness, you're going to be able to have the limiting factor in your lifts be the amount of weight on the bar, right? When I transitioned from being a long distance runner coming into strength training, it was always that the weight got too heavy. It was never that I was like, I'm running out of gas when I'm lifting these weights. It was always pretty easy to do that kind of stuff. In fact, I had a tendency to do kind of like almost too much volume just because I was so used to doing so much volume in all my running, right? And so when you're doing your strength training, you want to make sure that the weight on the bar is the limiting factor, not that you're getting too fatigued rep to rep so that you can't perform, right? Because the only way you can overload the anaerobic system is if the aerobic system is remaining intact and not gassing out before the anaerobic system has a chance to be overloaded. Okay, so pillar number 2 is muscular endurance. Now, muscular endurance and cardiovascular endurance often go hand in hand, but not always. So, for example, if you are doing rowing, you're going to be getting a full body muscular endurance effect going on. Your legs are pushing, and then you're rowing with the upper body. So the upper body, lower body, you get a whole systemic effect going. Conversely, if you're running, to a certain extent, you have to have the endurance to keep your arms up, right? But it's really not that much, right? After a couple of weeks of running, you're not going to be getting very fatigued in your forearms, especially if you do some lifting on the side. You're going to, it's going to be a walk in the park for you, right? So while running and the cycling and all those kind of things are great for muscular endurance for the lower body, they're not all that great for upper body movements. So if you want to be training your upper body for muscular endurance, then things like doing dumbbell and barbell complexes where you pick, a weight that, let's say, for example, you can do, 10 reps with that weight, right? And you just go on a circuit and you perform back-to-back exercises with no rest in between, and you perform 10 reps, right? And maybe in between you rest or something for a minute or something, and then you go pick up that thing again, and you do as many reps as you can all the way around, and then you go all the way down until you're down to, maybe only 1 rep that you can do. Those are a great way to build full body conditioning, and then another great way to build just for upper body conditioning is obviously doing calisthenics, things like push-ups, pull-ups. Now, again, it depends on how many reps you can perform, right? How long does a set go for? So for one person, doing a pull-up is going to be like their 1 rep max. So for them, that would be actually strength training, right? For somebody who can bang out 20 pull-ups, that's getting more on to the verging on towards muscular endurance exercise, right? For somebody who can do 100 push-ups, that's again an endurance exercise in endurance. And so for my purposes, like the official definition is like muscular endurance is anything that is 60 seconds, where the set takes 60 seconds or longer, right? And considering a set of 10 to 12 reps takes about 30 seconds to complete, we're looking at about 20 repetitions, maybe 25 repetitions, right? So usually 15, 20, 25 repetitions and above, that's where you're getting onto that muscular endurance phase. Now, one of the biggest benefits of muscular endurance is to help you develop movement proficiency, right? Especially as a beginner, because we're talking about beginners here, right? When you come into the gym, you want to make sure that you have good mind-body connection, right? It is a coordination to do some of these exercises, right? A lot of times my clients, if they have never lifted weights before, it might take them, several weeks to a month to actually, perfect their deadlift form. And it seems pretty simple. You're just reaching down, picking up the bar, lifting it off the floor, but there are a couple steps involved, and there's a coordination in that whole process of doing that, right? And so doing things at higher reps and sub-maximal loading allows you to develop that movement proficiency safely and efficiently. It also helps to improve your metabolic efficiency so that you can transport nutrients more efficiently throughout your body. In addition to cardiovascular exercise, it also helps to increase the capillary density so that, again, you can deliver oxygen more efficiently to your working tissues, which will stand you in good stead when you start moving heavier and heavier weights and working at higher and higher intensities. So if you want to progress, let's say you're in the muscular endurance phase, right? You are, maybe you're starting out and you're doing push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups, right? For example, maybe you're doing some inverted rows too for the upper back, and you're doing some walking and running a couple times a week. Maybe you're throwing in some kettlebell swings and some body weight squats with a kettlebell or something like that. And that's what you're doing for your routine, okay? So how would you progress this to the next phase, right? Because your next phase is going to be more of a bodybuilding style routine. Now, there's a few ways you can do this, but one of the easiest ways that I find you can do this is, again, you start off with that about 20 reps, right? So take about 60% of, once you've assessed what your one rep max is for all of your key lifts, take about 60% of that and do as many repetitions as you can, right? So if you get 15 repetitions with 60%, then what you would try to do the following week is try to increase it and try to work your way up to doing 20 reps, right? Now, if you can do 20 repetitions with 60% of your 1 rep max, then what you try to do is the next week is add 5 to 10%. So if it's an upper body exercise like an overhead press or you're doing a bench press or something, you're going to add about 5% of the total weight onto that. So you're doing about 65% of what your 1 rep max was, and try to do the same amount of reps as you did in week number 1. So that was 20, right? Now for the lower body, you add about 10% because they're bigger muscle groups, stronger muscle groups. They can usually handle bigger progressions. And so the following week then, if you again try to add more weight, right? And if you can maintain the same reps, so 20 repetitions for the following week, and then the following week you would again add more weight. However, if you are not able to increase the weight and maintain those repetitions, then instead of adding more weight the following week, you would just try to maintain that weight where it's at and increase the number of reps. Now, eventually, after a period of time, and this might take a month, it might take 2 months, it may take 3 months, right? It really depends on how consistently you are training, your other factors going on in your life, how much sleep you're getting, how much stress you have going on, genetic factors, the quality of your nutrition, making sure that, so that how fast you're recovering, right? But usually sometime between, a month of consistently doing this, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, you will hit a point where that's not going to work anymore, right? You're not going to be able to keep on either progressing and adding more reps or adding more weight and staying in that 15 to 20 repetition range, right? So when that comes and you are like, okay, you have 2 consecutive weeks where the weight's not going up or the reps aren't going up and the weight's not going up, right? So let's say, for example, you get to 1 week and you increase the weight and you're trying to do 20 repetitions with this new weight, but you only get 15 repetitions, okay? So the following week, you're like, okay, I'm going to try to increase from 15 repetitions and get up to 18, 20 repetitions, whatever, right? But you again hit 15 repetitions. Well, what do? If you again hit that 15 repetitions, I would recommend adding in another set, right? So the following week, add another set, right? And when you are able to do both, if you can do, after doing a week or 2 of 2 sets of 15, right? Or maybe a set of 15, a set of 10, right? Which is actually probably more reasonable. Then the following week, add a little bit more weight on, and just try to do 1 set, or not add more weight on, but just try to max out and do as many reps as you can for 1 set. right? It's because if you're doing 2 sets of, let's say you're doing a set of 15 and a set of 10, you're getting, a total of 25 reps instead of 20, right? Which you're still making a net gain there in your volume, right? And then if you get 2 sets of 15, you're getting 30 reps, which is like 10 reps more, and so substantially more volume than you were doing before, right? Now let's say you get to this point where it's like, okay, I can't add another set, or and then you kind of keep on doing that same thing, just adding more weight. So try to keep 15 repetitions, add more 2 sets of 15, add more weight, and if you can't add more weight, then just try to maintain that. So it's like, let's say for example you add more weight on there, now you're down to 10 repetitions and you increase it up, right? So the general progression here is that you're going to be either trying to increase the weight or increase the reps, and so you have a rep range. Starting out, you're anywhere between the 15 to 20 repetition range. If you're at the lower end of the rep range, then you're trying to increase your weight week to week. If you're at the higher end, or you're trying to increase your reps in that week, if you're at the higher end, then you're trying to increase your weight. And then when you get stuck and you're no longer able to progress, then you're going to be falling down to that, higher, more sets, right? And so maybe you're down to 3 sets of 10. Okay, so you're down at 3 sets of 10, you do the same thing. You try to increase the weights or the reps. So if you're falling down and you're at 8 repetitions, then you try to increase the reps the next time to get back up to 10. If you can't increase the weight or the reps, then you're 4 sets of 8, right? And you keep on progressing like that. So, which would be going into that more or less of a bodybuilding stage, right? So the next section would be your bodybuilding section, right? Which is usually somewhere between, 8 or 10 and 15 reps, right? So you're starting this cycle now of doing the bodybuilding rep ranges, right? And so let's say you plateaued at the 15 and now you're doing 3 sets of 10, and you do follow that same thing. When that you stall out there, then you're down to the 4 sets to 8 category, which is more the higher volume end of like a powerlifting type cycle, right? And so, because like powerlifting, you're usually somewhere between 8 and 1 rep, right? For the most part. And all these things, there's some variation. Sometimes you get to do higher reps when you're powerlifting, sometimes you get to do lower reps in your bodybuilding, but these are your general numbers, right? And so when you get to this powerlifting phase, you follow that same cycle of increase that weight, and until you finally get to the power or the speed and power one, right? And the speed and power one is where you are actually going back down to maybe using the weights that you were doing in recalculate them out though, because you're probably gotten much stronger, but you're going to be using weights that are about 30 to 60% of whatever your 1 rep max is, right? So let's say for example you're doing, just to make the numbers easy, if you do a 100-pound back squat, you're going to be doing anywhere between 30 to 60 pounds for doing like jump squats, right? And you're going to be also resting about the same amount of time that you were for powerlifting or strength training, so about 2 to 5 minutes in between sets. This is one of the things where, when people are doing like HIIT training, right, and they talk about high intensity interval training, most of the time they get it wrong because HIIT training actually relies on that, phosphocreatine, adenosine triphosphate primarily, and it's much more reliant on these carbohydrate sources rather than fat and oxygen, like your more oxidative or your slow oxidative systems, right? So it's going to take you longer because it actually takes time for that. Once you burn those ATP levels down, it takes a few minutes for that actually to regenerate. So if you are taking very short rest periods in between and just going back-to-back sets, you're actually training more or less endurance than you are actually training intensity, right? And so when you're doing your squats or whatever, you want to do these explosive squats, right? So there's a couple ways that you can do this, and you want to be doing like 1 to 3 reps, okay, right? So it's all about precision, crisp, maximal force production when you are doing this form of training, right? So for example, you're doing a back squat, you go down and you're gonna use 30 to 60% of whatever the weight was, right? And for your 1 rep max. Now there's a couple different ways that you can warm up to doing this, because obviously you don't want to just walk in the gym and start doing super fast contractions. Is an excellent way to pull a muscle, right? So instead you're going to do some like submaximal things, right? So you could start off and do like a slow jog or something like that, down the track for if you're doing sprinting, right? And then the next one you go a little bit faster, and then you're doing various different like mobility things and stuff, dynamic mobility as you go on, and you just go faster and faster and faster until you get to those a couple your working sets, right? Kind of similar to the gym where you're adding more weight all the way until you get to your top one. Now, what I actually find is potentially even a better way to do that is to utilize something called post-activation potentiation, right? And it's very similar to what you might have experienced as a kid when you're pouring cereal or pouring milk on your cereal in the morning, right? And that is where you go and you reach for the jug of milk, and normally if it's full, it's going to weigh roughly around 8 pounds, right? And so you are expecting it to be kind of heavy, especially if you're like, 8-year-old kid or whatever, and you go over there, grab that milk, and you're going to go pour it on, and lo and behold, your brother has drunk most of the milk, and so that your hand kind of flies up, right? Because you're expecting it to be heavier. So it's the same concept applied here. And so what happens is if you go and you do a heavy set, right? Then if you substantially reduce the weight on the following set, it's going to feel much, much easier to lift it, right? So let's say you're doing like a 90% of your 1 rep max back squat, and then you drop it down to 75% on the next set. It's going to feel like a warm-up set, right? It's going to be pretty easy to do. And so if we pair that with a power movement, right? And this is actually in some of my workouts in the hybrid strength program, this is what we actually do, right? We will start it out where we pyramid up, maybe starting out with like you're doing like something with a squat, right? So you do like 10 reps, 7 reps, 5 reps, and then maybe just leave it at 5. If you're, depending on the day, maybe we go up to 3 reps, right? And then you rest briefly, and then you go right into your power thing, which could either be doing like a box jump, or you could be doing a weighted, like you can do jump squats with dumbbells, you can do jump squats with the barbell, whatever the case may be. And it's actually going to allow you to produce much more force and get much more power because you've already primed your nervous system with the heavy lift beforehand. It's going to allow you to perform a lot better. So that's actually how I typically recommend doing it, because then you can actually get all of your strength training involved as well, and that's why I really like the hybrid strength program. Obviously that is just one segment of it. The other thing I will give you though is that you are going to want to use similar movement patterns, similar muscle groups when you're doing it, right? So if you're doing squats as your primary movement that day, your power exercise probably shouldn't be, doing like kettlebell swings or a barbell clean or something, right? It's using a different movement pattern than doing the squat. So you'd want to be doing a jump squat. If you're doing a deadlift, maybe doing a barbell clean or a kettlebell swing might be an appropriate exercise for you to be taking advantage of that mechanism and helping you to not only get strong, but also get more fast and explosive as well. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. Hopefully you found the information beneficial, maybe cleared up some of the confusion out there surrounding how to progress from beginner status up into some of the more advanced categories of strength training, and kind of how that looks. Because there is like a lot of times people, like if you go on like an online forum or something like that, and they'll be like, hey, I'm getting into lifting. What is the best, way for me to build muscle, or what is the best way for me to get a bigger bench press or something, right? And they're kind of jumping too far ahead. And so sometimes people will give good advice and they'll be like, oh, do a 5x5 program, or hey, if you're trying to get strong, or yeah, you want to do, 3 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 8, or do push-pull legs, or whatever the case may be, right? And really, you don't actually have to be all that complicated in how you are doing your exercises in the beginning. In fact, you want to be doing much more volume. Sometimes these programs, they actually work great. They're, push-pull legs is probably one of the best just general bodybuilding programs out there, debatably, but it is a very good program. 5x5, definitely a very good program, right? But if you're just starting out, that's not necessarily what you need to be focusing on. And that's why there's a couple rungs on that ladder before you get to that stage. And I would definitely say focusing on just general physical fitness, and then some bodybuilding training, prep work, and then get into more powerlifting, strength, heavier lifting and stuff like that. It's going to allow you to stay a little bit leaner as you are actually getting bigger as well, and take as much advantage of every muscle fiber that you have, as opposed to just getting right into the heavy lifting right off the bat. At least this has been my experience, and I do have a background as an endurance athlete, playing a lot of soccer, basketball, and doing long distance running and cycling. And so there is some nuances to that as well, because depending on, your genetic makeup, some people have more fast twitch muscle fibers. Those tend to be the kind of guys who lean more towards bodybuilding, powerlifting, track and field, football, wrestling, those kind of activities, right? And so sometimes there is a case to be made that your program might be a little bit different, but I think everybody can benefit by just having a general base of physical fitness before you start going for more specific strength or aesthetics goals. So guys, if you like the video, hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more content related to program design for either building muscle, athletic performance, losing fat, as well as nutrition surrounding these kind of things, and then how to prevent getting injured while you are building towards your goals, as well as how to work around those injuries should you happen to get them, then consider subscribing to the channel by hitting the button in the lower right hand corner of the screen. And we'll see you all next time for more health and fitness information.